Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Guest today, Ted Elonis. Ted, appreciate you being here, man. Happy to have you on. And can you tell us, first of all, where you're calling in from and what you do for a living with Fit Suites?
Calling in from Long Island. For a living, I'm glorified self-employed entrepreneur. Started multiple brands, so pretty much self-employed.
Awesome, man. Just tell me a little bit more about your background, and I guess as it relates to Fit Suites, what kind of got you interested after obviously having other brands getting into this space specifically, and what you kind of notice out there in the market that you're looking to do a little bit differently or better with this brand?
Yeah, I think it helps to go kind of first into my background. So went to college, originally wanted to be a doctor at a young age, decided I like partying more than I wanted to be a doctor. So kind of transitioned into a different major and kind of just goofed her off on college instead of actually focusing on my studies. Luckily, my partner already had that mindset where college wasn't his fit. So in my last year as a senior, I was doing my internship at Princeton. He was dropping into college at the same time, and he just never saw college as a path. So we both were really big into fitness, and at that time, kind of in the bodybuilding space. I went to Rutgers. He kind of, again, dropped into Rutgers University. So think about New Jersey, 2015, height of, Jersey Shore, bodybuilding, all that type of...
Oh, yeah. I'm in New York as well, so. Yeah.
Nice. But yeah, you understand the culture, right, at the time.
For sure. Yeah.
And at the time, a lot of meal delivery services were popping up. Again, meal prepping was still a thing, but was kind of the newest niche. We started ordering from a local guy and just tried it and just said, hey, we think we can do this better. Well, mainly my brother did. And kind of, again, he was just like, hey, can you help me out? I guess I've always had a knack for operational kind of expertise in terms of, that's just where I thought, where Matt was more head in the clouds, sales and marketing. So kind of it naturally just was a perfect partnership, which again, I would recommend anybody starting businesses, partner with somebody who's not, good at something that you're not. If not, you're going to waste time and either have to outsource or just you'll butt heads too much. But going back into that, so we started a company called Fit Fuel Prep, really a tongue twister, focusing first on the bodybuilding space, delivered in New Jersey, eventually expanded to New York, Long Island, Connecticut, and started having really great growth. But again, at the time, Jersey, there was probably 20 different companies. So we kind of plateaued within the first 18 months. Again, no background in business, started with a Costco membership, sold my Xbox to kind of have, that was our seed money, and made profit from day one. So our first 18 months in sales, based it about a little under $1 million and profit about $300,000. So again, just got lucky in terms of just understanding that we'd make something and sell for more money and ideally delivering value. We started understanding as we grew that, hey, we need to position ourselves outside of this. So at the time, my brother was a huge, big muscular guy, just didn't want to be that guy anymore. So ended up doing the keto diet as a thing just to kind of experiment with his body. And he dropped 60 pounds in a matter of 3 months. And wow. At the time, we were starting to struggle. We just took out a bunch of loans because we had everything outsourced at the time, but we started bringing everything in-house in terms of that quality control. So a bunch of, shark loans, things like that. We were starting to sweat at night because payables were piling up. So we basically overnight pivoted from a bodybuilding focused concept into a keto concept. So instead of doing, chicken, rice, and broccoli, we did chicken, cauliflower, and broccoli. And within, call it 8 weeks, that the new business, which is called Keto Fridge, outpaced Fit Fuel Prep 3-1. And we just saw exponential hockey growth, which again, that's kind of that magic moment you see in business, just seeing hockey growth grow. So then from there, we expanded nationwide, partnered with UPS, and then started serving everything from meals, desserts, ice cream, all shipped in the same box. And within 3 years of starting, pivoting to Keto Fridge, we basically hit a top line of 10 million in sales, and we ended up selling that business in late 2019, early 2020, right before COVID. So kind of a weird time if I ever remember that time. But that background was just great because it was just the greatest crash course in terms of the business. We had 75 employees. We had to do everything from, supply chain, sourcing ingredients, bringing in, cooking, packing, and shipping. So you basically have the greatest crash course in business that probably everyone, you can't emulate that in school. So very lucky to have that experience. But the cool thing was that we're kind of transitioning into Fit Suites is with keto, it was a kind of a new age where, again, chicken, cauli rice, and broccoli is cool, but what got people in the door was the new exciting products, keto cookies, keto ice cream. We did unique pizza crusts. So we had a great employee when becoming our head of R&D. So we basically spun out a whole division where we basically created about 3 new products a month. And that became kind of almost a blessing in disguise. I learned how to quickly make a product, get feedback, work on nutritionals, find co-men, scale it. And, looking back in hindsight, I was like, oh, wow, this was the greatest thing ever happened. So after selling that business, we got approached by other people saying, hey, they want to start their own business similar to the meal delivery space. We didn't want to go back in that space because there's a lot of constraints. You have to basically prepare food, cook it, ship it in such a tight window. And even though there's some type of scalability, you're very limited on the upside. You can't really get into retail with that. Granted, you can do packaged goods, things like that, but we decided the next step was we wanted to create a product that was just out of this world. So looking back, we kind of did a lot of deep dive and said we were so busy running the meal delivery business that we actually never had time to eat. So we had an inflection point where we're like, what if we could have a meal in a pit? And that was just, people might laugh and say, wow, why don't you want to eat? But if you ever run a business, it's hard to eat sometimes. You just don't have the time, or you may be stressed or just over caffeinate where you don't have the appetite. But then again, you still need to eat. So at the time, all these nutraceutical gummies were popping up, the Ollies of the world, everything was going to the gummy space. So we said, wow, instead of doing a meal in a pill, let's do a meal in a gummy. So that's the idea of how basically FitSweets was born. So we put out a couple different job ads on Collabtree. It's like almost a Craigslist for working with scientists. And we found a biochemist out of Mexico City who said, again, it wasn't food scientist, was basically a chemist by trade, and said, hey, he'll take on the project. So we basically sent a little money, did a contract, and started as basically a huge tennis ball looking product. It was probably tastes as good as a basically dog food. And the concept was basically we wanted to make the world's healthiest meal in the convenience of candy, gummies, whatever you want to call it. So that was basically emulating a salmon, avocado, kale, and sweet potato meal. And basically, after we got the process back and forth, we eventually applied for a visa for our co-founder and biochemist out of Mexico City. He flew out. We worked for a matter of almost 3 years to get the product to where it was edible and people would actually openly, want it. And again, the major concept was basically having a meal to pill. We said, okay, what would be our first product market fit? And we thought would be great would be the MREs, which is, if anyone doesn't know, meal ready to eat, a place like the military or humanitarian relief, to say hurricanes hit in Puerto Rico or across the world. They can ship these meals. They're shelf stable, may require a little water, maybe and heat if they want to taste better. So we said, okay, we found out working with a lot of different people that they actually do this thing called field stripping. And field stripping basically is they have these huge 8x10 bags of food where they actually throw out half of it because either it's too heavy or just not what's desirable. So they'll save the candy, they'll save the protein. So we said, okay, cool, there's something there. So our goal was to make the healthiest meal in the most condensed form factor. And that was the initial concept. And we've done a ton of different work with the military so far. Right now, we're in field testing. That takes about 3 years in terms of actually getting to the market. We've done contract with SpaceX as basically we were a contingency plan in case they ever got stuck up there. And then we found out by happenstance that we kind of required them to order a minimum quantity, not just enough for a little bit. So because they had such a surplus, they actually started serving in their cafes where, got to think these people are probably one of the smartest people in the world, right? And we found out that they just loved it because it was just so futuristic in science. So that's when we said, okay, wow, maybe we need to take a step back and say, this is maybe a cooler consumer product, almost maybe techie, think of Silicon Valley. And that's when we kind of shaped it from being this one piece cube product, moving it to now saying, okay, let's just emulate candy. So think about your favorite candy that you're at the movie theater, you're at a convenience store, and Sour Patch, Swedish Fish, gummy worms, gummy bears. And so, okay, we're going to take this technology that we again spent about 3 years, have filed patents for, and just almost impossible to make, is that let's just put it into recognizable items. And that's kind of where we're at today. So right now, we're launching this brand new product called FitSweets. If you tried it, you would think it's just like candy. And this will be launching the product around Q3 of this year, the consumer market.
It's awesome. It's so fascinating. I appreciate you sharing your perspective of kind of your product development, initial time that it takes, because it's one of the biggest pieces of advice whenever I ask other folks in CPG, if you give advice to anybody else getting into the space, basically, what would it be? And people always say expect the roadmap to be 3 times as long as you think it's going to be, basically. So I always appreciate insights into that. And so I guess when you think about obviously kind of maybe making a pivot from MREs to maybe more of just a consumer facing product, it's kind of exactly what I thought when I first looked at it. I was like, this is very futuristic. You see things in sci-fi concepts and movies and stuff. There's always those tiny little things that are like meals, and it looks exactly like that. So I could definitely see that kind of niche in Silicon Valley, kind of SpaceX, those types of people in those types of careers. I could definitely see it hitting it all for us. So yeah, I guess in your general go-to-market strategy, I guess when you do the consumer launch in Q3, what are you kind of looking to what kind of avenues are you looking to take advantage of when you're selling this? Are you looking to do more of a direct-to-consumer kind of model? Are you looking to partner with retailers or work with even maybe corporate campuses and things? What's kind of your general strategy from that side of things? things?
Yeah, so of course, our background, e-commerce is an obvious, and ever
Right.
since COVID, e-commerce used to be capped, I would say, and I think now since COVID, people are just, or whether it is that the consumer behavior has changed, so e-commerce
Yeah.
is bigger than it's ever been, and of course, people go, oh, duh, but like when I first started, my first business was people were like, oh, you got to get the retail, you got to get the retail, that's where the scales, and they're not wrong, but now e-commerce has so much more upside. There's your direct to consumer, there's Amazon. Amazon has a great, now you can almost build your almost perfect website out of Amazon. Other online retailers that you could be your reseller. So definitely the first is e-commerce. It's just easy because you can own the data. You can actually get real feedback from consumers of what they like, what they don't like, and maybe you're not even putting the right messaging on your packaging of presenting the right way. You'll get the best feedback from customers. And the only really way to have that touch point is e-commerce. But during this process, we just brought on a chairman. He was actually the founder of Veggie Straws. People are probably familiar with it. It's my favorite chip, actually, ironically. And
Ronnie fit seems like, yeah.
Yeah, so he's had two massive exits. So we're partnering with him on the retail side just because we don't have a huge background in retail. It's a holder game. It's you got to know somebody club. It's very old school. It's not retired unless you know how to break in. You're going to either get overpay, you're going to get screwed over. So we're partnering with that. And I think the major retailers we want to kind of partner with is our ideal market would be club stores like a Costco, because you can do different pack outs. There's good, still healthy margin there, especially because that's where a lot of people are buying today, just because people want to save on groceries as groceries are climbing. And the next stage would basically be, call it mass market grocery. So think about like Target, Walmart, the Krogers of the world. And those would be our first go-to-market strategy. So lining this out is basically e-commerce Q3 of this year and start to sample with these people and making sure we're getting the right placement. Because again, if people don't know retail, you get basically one shot. So you have to basically be positioned right. The buyer has to love what you do. And you go into these stores, you have to basically you have to tell them, ideally you want to do their job for them. And this is what I've learned over the last, call it 6 months of working with our president, is basically that you have to tell them where this needs to go and why people will buy it. So you have to basically do all the work for them. So it's just an obvious yes. So how we see this as being just the lowest hanging fruit is basically next to the protein bars, because basically we're working on different slogans or whatever you want to call it. But right now we're kind of, everything that's stuck is basically when a protein bar is not enough. I'm not a big protein bar consumer. I drink protein shakes probably daily. They're great. But what people don't really know is essentially protein bars are just dried powder, protein powder extruded and pressed into a bar. I never feel great when I eat them. I'll eat them out of necessity if I'm on a road trip or whatnot. And protein shakes are great, but people don't know as well is you absorb them so quick. So if you're having 25 grams of protein, that's hitting your digestive system within 30 minutes. Not a scientist by any means, don't mean to preach. So what we've done different with FitSuits is we have it back into all the technology, and I know this is backtracking a little bit, but we've actually formulated where it digests just like a meal. So a normal meal will digest over 3 to 4 hours. This is the same thing what FitSuits will do. And that's basically a combination of basically the fact that it's a gummy and it's specific ingredients that we've done in order to digest slower rather than just hitting your bloodstream quick and potentially maybe have to go to the bathroom, just as quick. So that's kind of our kind of position is we want to basically compete with the protein bar market, because how tired will you be of eating the same protein bar, where this is definitely unique, offers the same value. I think it's a lot more fun eating experience to it. And also maybe more, in my opinion, it's been a lot more satiating.
Yeah, I think that aspect that you have of kind of the slower digestion, slower absorption, I think people will resonate with that when they try it. Because when you think about things like protein bars or kind of like those snacks, like I feel like most people really actually focus on the way that they feel after they eat it, not even necessarily just the taste. So I feel like you have that as like an alternative to like, these protein bars that a lot of them have a lot of sugar, which like I just realized recently, because I love my protein bars, but you look at them and it's like, wow, there's like 25 grams of sugar in this thing. That's like a lot. It's like half a soda. So no, that makes sense. And I think it's become very common as well, to your other point, which is basically just having that proof of concept through success on an e-commerce side of things before you go into those retail conversations can be really powerful, I think, especially when you can kind of identify like who your niches are, like who your ideal customers are, to kind of help you having those conversations and say like, listen, we know exactly who resonates with this. We know exactly who's buying it. This is where it should go, rather than like, oh, like you guys know best. And then if they mess up, they're just going to blame it on you and rip it off the shelves, right? So I think it's really good advice. Like for anybody, again, like kind of maybe interested in getting into this space, thinking about the retail side, you do get one shot. And when it's there, like your reputation can be scathed and they all talk. So I think it's really good advice to kind of do that proof of concept first and also outsource to somebody who obviously has more experience in that area. It's your other point as well. So I think it's a really great perspective. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. And to that point, is anyone who's thinking about launching a CPG brand, I've had more failures than success, and that's how I think most people do. But the best thing about launching on e-commerce first is what's working before. You might have 4 flavors and only 2 of them really sell. Well, those are the 2 you want to bring to the retail, and you can show the data. So this way you're not just guessing. And also on top of that, again, getting feedback from consumers is the biggest thing on packaging is the call outs. People have to I call it the 20 feet test. 20 feet away, people that either one is recognize your brand, that's what really branding is, but also immediately get it. People are so busy that nobody really subconsciously wants to really think about what this is. And it's hard to do that as a new product. So having that online, having the right call out before you invest all this money into packaging, inventory, and then you're going to retail, you have to pay slotting and just a lot of money. So testing online is basically, in CPG, is basically like the whole motto with technology is like move fast and break things. That's where online's great. Also, it becomes pre-launch, call it, platform before you go and launching new products into retail. You basically can test them. You don't have to make as much, test them, and then you can kind of, again, take that data to your retailer and say, hey, we launched a new product. You want to bring this on as well? Because we're in the process of launching a finalizing formula. People are probably familiar with like Athletic Greens, which again, great product. One of the most impressive businesses I think launched in the last 10 years. Something like that is they have one SKU and I think they do over $100 million in sales. That's like the ideal business, not getting the SKU chasing game, which I've done many times over. For me, is I just don't find it personally convenient and I don't love the taste. I know I'm probably the minority on that. So we've seen the success of like a Fiber One brownie. So we've actually worked again with our biochemist and we basically put the concept of Athletic Greens into a similar product called a Fiber One brownie. Instead of in the morning having Athletic in the green juice, which I think is a great thing of feeling healthy drinking green juice. I don't think we can really compete with that. But there's people who don't like that. So we kind of basically want a touch point where like in the morning, you wake up, you have your morning routine, you have your coffee or your tea or whatever you do. We kind of want to pair that with this veggie brownie concept. So the ideal goal over Fit Sweets' career longevity or plan is basically we want to have 2 or 3 products throughout the day that people consume on a daily basis. And kind of our best analogy of what we're trying to really go for long term is kind of building the Apple of food. So, and again, Apple didn't start with these crazy iPhones. They start with the general concept of personal home computing. So our thing is basically we want simple food products that people will consume on a daily basis. It's an obvious convenience. It's easy and people understand it.
That definitely makes sense. And I think it's an important thing to think about too. And anybody, in a CPG brand, it's like, what's going to drive that free recurring business, especially on the D2C side. Your customer acquisition with paid ads and other things, even like boosting your posts on socials can kind of drive that cost up. If you can get somebody in and like have it be a part of their routine, I think is one of the best ways to really drive that recurring business that's really going to have like subscribers instead of just one-off customers, right? Whether it's in stores or whether it's online. So I love that outlook and I appreciate you sharing kind of high level, like where your outlook is and what you're kind of looking to do at a more kind of conceptual level. It's really fascinating what you're doing, I think. And so, yeah, I guess, and then Ted, there's one question I always love to ask everybody that comes on the podcast, especially someone like you who's like kind of gone through the trials and tribulations of multiple types of brands, obviously made some mistakes along the way. So if you could give any one piece of advice to anybody that, is looking to start a CPG brand, what would you think that piece of advice would be? I
would say I have 2 or maybe 3 little tidbits. One, you've already hit on it. Everything's going to take longer than you think. Everything's going to be harder than you think. Just be patient. You know what I mean? Second thing is before starting any business, first get real feedback. Don't ask your friend or people who are obviously, oh, it's a great idea. Either, there's a book called The Mom Test where, I encourage everyone to read it. But if not, make your food product, bring it to a party, leave it on a table. If no one eats it, hate to break it to you, nobody wants it. Whereas if you have products where when we first started Fit Sweets, people didn't really want it. When we changed it, and I'm always at a lab or working at the Co-Man, where we came up with these new candy products, when we basically would make it, if you ever saw like a gummy manufacturing, everything's on trays in these curing rooms. It's amazing. And there's hundreds of employees at these places, right? And they're not necessarily supposed to eat the product, but when you're in the lab and you have these things sitting around, I just always look at the people who are, kind of working on a product and making it. If they're going back and trying it, because they always got to try something, just like a chef. But if they're going back for seconds or thirds, that's when you kind of have something. So I definitely encourage people to make sure they really make sure that there's something that people want. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you might be missing something. And then the last thing I would say is, before starting any business, especially consumer packaged goods, this is a relationship. I would say make sure you really you see yourself working on this business for the next 5-7 years. If not, you shouldn't be in it. The first year is like any relationship. It's exciting, it's new, it's fun, but make sure you're really willing to get into this. It's a serious long-term relationship. So I think that'd be my most important advice.
No, I think it's really good advice and really interesting perspective on, kind of looking for those like coming up, maybe like alternative feedback channels of like, just in your everyday life, you're out like kind of socializing with people, leave something on the table. Or like people like trying it in the factory. You probably don't think that people are doing that or not supposed to, but if you're realistic, you're like, of course that they are. So if you pay attention, you can kind of get those like different feedback channels instead of the affirmative, like, somebody who's a customer or you're doing like a demo at an event or something. Obviously those are great, but there might be a little bit of bias there when you're staring at somebody waiting waiting for them to get their feedback. Be like, oh yeah, it's great. You know, you're asking your mom, it's like, oh yeah, like she's gonna tell you she loves it, but you got to find ways to get that real, like unbiased feedback as well. I think that's a really creative way to thinking about that. So I appreciate that perspective. And Ted, I just want to give you an opportunity as well for anybody listening, might be interested in just trying the product or maybe reaching out to you for potential business partnership or collaboration or anything like that. What's the best way to stay in touch with you all?
Direct contact, anyone can email me at ted@fitsweets.co. After that, if we end up hitting it off, I'll give you my number and you can text me anytime.
Awesome. Well, Ted, I just want to say thank you again for coming on, man. I really love what you're doing. I just want to wish you the best of luck and continued success. Really looking forward to staying in touch as well.
Awesome. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
You too. Thanks, Ted.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.